I begin the February forecast, I would just like to take a moment to let everyone know that the Astrology Hub Foundations Level 3 that I am teaching is now open for enrollment. The actual course itself exists of 4 weeks of pre-recorded material that will be released each week, 4 lessons a week of about a half an hour to 40 minutes, 45 minutes per lesson. And the subject of this level 3, which does not require completion of level 1 and 2, if you know enough about the planet signs, houses, and enough about the major aspects, you'll be fine in this course. But this course is on the magic of harmonic aspects. And for those of you who know me and know my work, you know that harmonics and harmonic aspects has been a primary driver. It comes across in my natal chart work when I'm looking at quintiles and septiles and all the tiles that are not part of traditional astrology. It opens up doors that will open your imagination in astrology, reactivate your excitement about astrology. So if you're intrigued by any of this, go to astrologyhub.com/F3 for Foundations Level 3 and enroll in the course. It's going to be really exciting. It's a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to teaching this. It's dense. There's a lot of information in it. And remember also that if you are an Inner Circle member at the Astrology Hub, or if you are a Patreon of mine, you do get a 20% discount, and you will have those discounts either from Astrology Hub or directly through Patreon from me. Don't forget to use that discount if you're a member, and otherwise the cost is still very reasonable for what you're getting. I'm excited about it. That's it for now. astrologyhub.com/F3, and now on to the forecast. Greetings all. Welcome to the February 2023 astrological forecast. I'm Rick Levine, and we have, as always, an intriguing month ahead. Before we get there, I'd like to whiz through some events that I have coming up. I'm going to make this very short and sweet. I'm not going to go through all the links. I'm going to put them in the comment section below. It'll be the first comment so that you'll be able to follow up on any of the events that I'm talking about. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I just want to list them out for you. There's some very exciting things coming up. First of all, February 10th through the 13th, I'll be in Los Angeles at the Conscious Life Expo. This is a huge event. There are hundreds of speakers about a variety of things. Astrology is one part of it. I'll be doing a lecture. I'll be on a panel. I'll be doing a post-conference workshop. That's Conscious Life Expo, February 10th through the 13th at the Los Angeles Hilton, actually at the LAX Hilton. On March 31st through April 2nd, I'll be in the Azores. This is off the coast of Portugal. And this is the third international conference of the Portuguese Astrology Society and Association. And the information is all on their website. It's in English and in Portuguese. There are going to be a number of American and British speakers there. So for those of you who don't speak Portuguese, as I don't either, there'll be plenty of things on the schedule that will be available in English only. And that's March 31st through April 2nd on the Azore Islands. Next thing up is the end of April, April 22nd through 28th. I'll be joining Sol Jonasson and a couple of other astrologers for a boutique conference. It'll be limited to 30 people. Once we reach 30 people, it will close out. So if this is intriguing to you, you'll want to register soon. The registration will be up in a few days. I'll put the link in the comments as soon as it's available. And this is a week-long conference in Tulum, Mexico. And so for those of you who want a vacation down to the Yucatan, and we'll actually have one day of excursion to the pyramids, but that's April 22nd through April 28th, and more information will be available in the link below. The next couple of events will both be at the Omega Institute, and this is just north of New York City in Rhinebeck, New York. The first of the two will be on June 30th through July 2nd. That's technically July 4th weekend. I know that doesn't make any sense because it's not July 4th, but June 30th through July 2nd at Omega Institute. The conference topic will be consciousness at the crossroads, and I'll be joining Maurice Fernandez, Ann Orderly, Lynn Bell, and Rachel Lang. This is going to be a stellar weekend, and I'm very excited about it, and I'll see many of you there. The next event at Omega will be on October 13th through the 15th, and that event I'll be co-teaching with Rachel Lang, and it will be a weekend about Venus, both an intellectual excursion and an experiential excursion. We'll be doing both ritual and presentation, lecture presentation, October 13th through the 15th. More information will be available also coming up soon. And the last event that I want to mention is a 10-day retreat in Goa, India. I have so much to say about this, and I'm not going to say it now, other than this is going to be an incredible experience. It's being held at a venue that I've taught at before. It's an amazing and beautiful place just up from the beach on the south end of Goa. Goa is a very special part of India. The climate is great, and we're right up from the beach. It's an Ayurvedic healing center. They do lots of yoga teaching there, and that's going to be December 6th through the 15th. December 6th to the 15th. That's being sponsored by Heaven and Earth Workshops. And again, all the links will be in the comment section. It'll be the first comment that'll be pinned to the top, so you'll be able to follow up on any of these events. Okay, so let's get into February. February is, like every other month, an intriguing month that stands on its own. What I find interesting about February is that there's some stuff at the very beginning of the month that really just packs a punch. Then toward the middle of the month, things get a bit heavier, more serious. And then with the full moon toward the middle end of the month and going out of the month, things are still buzzing, but they end up being a little bit more quiet, which is really a little bit misleading, because once we get to March, things are going to change drastically. I know we've been saying that, I have been saying that, and astrologers all around have been saying something to the effect that the real 2023 doesn't begin until the middle and end of March. And of course, that has to do with Mercury and Mars both being out of their shadow. I'll say more of that in a little bit. Plus, more importantly, it has to do with Saturn leaving the sign of Aquarius, moving into Pisces, which will be a whole new flavor of energy, and Pluto leaving Capricorn, where it's been for almost 2 decades, and moving into Aquarius, and that'll set the tone for the not only the year ahead, but the decades ahead. So I'm recording this on the night of January 31st. And we start the month of February with the moon in Gemini. And the moon in Gemini is really, we're coming off of a couple of days of buzz, but we're really also coming into a couple of days of heightened buzz. And that buzz is largely to do with Uranus. Now, the moon in Gemini is intriguing because it heightens our curiosity, and so we wake up on the morning of February 1st kind of eager to see what is ahead. But the moon, by later in the day on February 1st, the moon moves into Cancer. It settles down, and we may feel like we want to also lower our energy frequency, just kind of relax and rest where we are. But the cosmos have other things in store for us, because the sun in mid-Aquarius is coming into a square with Uranus in mid-Taurus. And this sun square Uranus in some ways is reminiscent of a lot of the energy that we've dealt with over the past year or two with Saturn squaring Uranus, because Saturn is still in Aquarius, the sun is in Aquarius, and those energies are still vibing similarly. But the sun square Uranus, which is exact on the evening of February 3rd, that sun square Uranus it's agitating, it's exciting, it's before a storm, we get this whole sense of positive ionization. And that doesn't mean positive, meaning we're feeling positive. It's negative ions feel good, positive ions are a bit irritating. And as the sun comes into that square with Uranus, like insects before a storm, we might feel agitated. It's not like we're swarming, but there's that sense of something's up. Something's up, and we're ready for something to happen. And for those of us who are on the edge and excited, well, we're going to force an issue. We're going to make something happen. Others, though, others of us will kind of pull in and pull back and try to keep things going normally so that we don't get upset or off center. But regardless, as we move through February 2nd, we're going to be feeling this more. Again, even though that moon in Cancer, it may be trying to keep it quiet. And by the time we get to Friday, February 3rd, when that sun makes the exact square with Uranus, it's like something can explode. And I don't necessarily mean physically, but there's a sense of disruption. I always think of Uranus and Uranus squares in particular like lightning striking. There's tension that's been building up. Maybe that Cancer moon has encouraged us to lay low or lay back or to not say a lot or just to attend to our inner world. And something happens and kaboom. There's an expression on the outer end. And again, this square between the sun and Aquarius, which is both fixed signs, the sun in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus, and yet there's a different modality of how they express. There's a different element of how they express. The Uranus in Taurus is expressing practical and earthy, and that sun in Aquarius is conceptual, and the two are kind of clashing. Those energies are clashing. And also on Friday, February 3rd, the moon moving through Cancer picks up on a trine to Neptune that's pretty close, exact midday. And so we're also feeling a bit either dreamy, spiritual, imaginative. We're off in the ethers, and yet something is cooking that can get our attention. The other thing that is coming into getting our attention is that Venus in Pisces. Venus is exalted in Pisces. She loves being there. There's a sensitivity, a softness, a compassion with Venus in Pisces. But Venus in Pisces is coming into a square with Mars in Gemini. Now remember, Mars in Gemini had been retrograde for a couple of months, for about 7 weeks actually, and turned direct. It's now beginning to pick up speed. It's been in Gemini for months, but it's beginning to pick up speed. But Venus is still moving a little faster than Mars, so Venus is coming into that square, and it will square exactly on February 4th, on Saturday. So this combination of the sun squaring Uranus, which is like going for the adrenaline. It's an attraction to doing something that is out of the box that we don't normally do. Things happen that people do things that we may not expect them to do. And yet if we're one of those people that's actually doing something and someone might be shocked at our actions, we're actually not shocked at all. We're just pleased or I was going to say pleased that we've finally done it. But it's a mixed bag because sometimes with that sun square Uranus, we can overreact and we can take something too far. But understand that although that's exact on February 3rd, we're going to be feeling it as the week builds toward the end of the week. And it's going to be residual for a few days, even through the weekend, for a very powerful reason that I'll come back to in just a moment. But I want everyone to understand that it's not just the sun squaring Uranus, because we're also feeling the conflict, the agitation from Venus, sweet Venus in sweet Pisces, coming up to a square with Mars in Gemini that's restless and wants to go somewhere and do something and be distracted by whatever it is that's next, that's coming up. And that Venus square Mars can actually be quite creative. It can be quite productive, but it also can be a bit upsetting if we let our ego get away with over expressing. And again, this comes back to the Sun square Uranus. You see, both the Sun square Uranus and Venus square Mars are want to produce action. They want something to happen from it, and they're both in a way they can be a bit disruptive or disruptive or conflictive. But the Venus square Mars can also be quite yummy. You know, it's kind of like when Venus squares Mars, if we get into it with someone we love, Venus being the planet of love, and Mars being the planet of combat, of getting into it. That the beautiful thing about a strong Venus Mars is makeup sex. Now, I don't mean that everyone has to have makeup sex during a Venus Mars or after a Venus Mars square, but it's that idea of being able to go into a place where there is conflict, and that conflict doesn't need to be assertive or aggressive. It can be very playful. And in playful conflict actually is where creativity comes from. And then there's that sense of coming together afterwards that can be really very, very powerful. So I find this an intriguing combination of stuff as the sun comes into squaring Uranus and Venus comes into squaring Mars on Friday the 3rd and on Saturday the 4th. And also on Saturday the 4th, the moon moves into Leo. The moon moves into Leo very early in the morning, depending upon where you are. And that moon coming into Leo is important because it's waking up that sense that we're coming into a full moon. You see, Leo is the sign that's opposite the sun. Technically, the sun in Aquarius is in its exile or detriment. It's as far away from its home sign as it can get because the sun is at home in Leo. But when the moon comes into Leo, and especially as that moon becomes full, and the full moon in Leo is at 10:28 a.m., and of course this is Pacific Standard Time, the full moon in Leo just before noon on Sunday, February 5th, is the heightened energy of this tension between the love that we express, that would be Leo, and the love that we receive from the community, that would be Aquarius. You see, Aquarius is part of the network of interrelationships in the community, and yet Leo is self-centered. It's expressed outward, and it certainly wants acknowledgement from the outside, but that Leo moon is the I need to express my love so that you can acknowledge who I am, or in some ways, the insecure Leo can be I need to know that I am loved, so I know who I am. But in either way here, we have a tug of war between the sun and the moon, because that's what full moons are. And they're also the fruition of what we began 2 weeks ago, a fortnight ago, at the new moon, also in early Aquarius. And so the seeds that we planted then might be coming to fruition on some level now. But this is not an easy fruition, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But I just want to make sure that we understand that the full moon in Leo is the tension between what I feel I need to express and what actually fits into the larger community of friends, family, and society around me. Now, normally that in itself that is a powerful full moon, because the moon in some ways is balancing off the sun's energy, and the sun feels far away from its home sign. So the moon is kind of reminding it of what it would feel like when it was at home. But here's the thing. The full moon is squaring Uranus, just as the sun exactly squared Uranus a couple days ago, but the full moon exactly squares Uranus just a few hours before the full moon. And so during this full moon, we have a full moon square to Uranus, which heightens all of that agitating, disruptive, adrenaline flowing, break in the energy, breakthrough. Often it's said of Uranus, it is the sign, or the planet rather, of awareness. Uranus is sometimes called the Great Awakener. But in fact, Uranus can be that breakthrough, or it also can be that break up. Either way here, there is a sudden strike of lightning that creates that aha experience that may in fact encourage an action in the outer world, but it may just be something that we experience internally and don't necessarily express. On the other hand, if we don't express our own breakthrough, chances are that we'll experience other people experiencing theirs. And so in some ways, we may not be able to escape from something happening during this period of time. Now, the other thing that's occurring that actually is not exact until February 6th is that Mercury in Capricorn is coming into a sextile with Neptune in Pisces. This, in some ways, can soften the blow of that other harder energy, but it also can be a bit of a trap, because Mercury in Capricorn knows what it's thinking and it's clear about it, but when it sextiles Neptune, it kind of begins to play the what-if game. And that what-if game can be very powerful, because imagination is a powerful motivating force. But on the other hand, it's also, it can be a bit problematic if we allow ourselves to run away with the dreams, with the imagination. We can kind of lose our sense of grounding with that Mercury sextiling Neptune. But I'm assuming that because the Mercury is in Capricorn, it will in fact be able to hold its own position enough. The other thing that's happening on the 6th, that's also exact on the 6th, is Venus is making a half square with Pluto. This is not very comfortable. This is, it's almost like we're being forced to go deeper into some issue that we don't necessarily want to go deeper into. There's something that we're confronting here. Remember, Pluto is often related to that which is unconscious, that which is in denial, that which is in the shadow realms, that which is hidden. And when Venus, the planet of sweet love, in its exalted position in Pisces, what that can do is that can make us feel like we're being forced to go somewhere that's very dark. On the other hand, when we go there, it also can be very juicy material that comes up that Venus actually can incorporate if we are willing to actually take that excursion into the shadow realms. So I think that this whole weekend of beginning on Friday with the sun squaring Uranus, though we'll be feeling it on Thursday, and all the way up through Monday, we're getting some pretty intense energy. By Tuesday, I think it's still residual, but Venus now has moved from a half square to Pluto, which is conflictive and anxiety producing, to a sextile with Uranus. This, on the other hand, is exciting. And again, it depends on who we are. For some people, we want everything in love to be smooth and to be what for someone else might consider to be boring. But for some of us, that actually the consistency and the reliability feels really good. And yet when that Venus makes that sextile with Uranus, things can be a bit exciting, and so exciting that we may not want to go there, that we may actually shut down some of that energy. On February 9th, that's Thursday, Mercury makes a sesquisquare, that's a square and a half, with Mars. And again, this is a bit of an argumentative day, possibly, where our mind is agitated. We may be feeling annoyed or angry with someone, or someone may get on our case for something. In some way, there's a bit of agitation going on between the intellectual mental state, that would be Mercury, and Mars. Understanding, however, in this, that Mercury is also coming up to a conjunction with Pluto that's not exact until tomorrow, until Friday, the 10th. But keep in mind that Mercury-Pluto together is really what's creating that square and a half with Mars. And there's a sense here of really having to hold our position and in some way make a stance, even though it can create some sense of disruption. Now, the moon has already moved into Libra, and the Libra moon is a good, what's the right word? Ameliorating factor, because that moon in Libra can encourage us and those around us to remember to be diplomatic. And I think that can be helpful on the 9th. And then on the 10th, on Friday, Mercury actually catches up with Pluto. And again, this is a deep dive. Remember, the Mercury conjunct Pluto in some ways is a mythological throwback to Mercury going into the realms of the hell realms to work out the deal that actually allowed Persephone, or Proserpina, who was abducted by Pluto, or Hades, into the underworld, that the conjunction of Mercury and Pluto is a remembrance of Mercury's job as the psychopomp. Mercury's job was to guide souls into through the underworld, to cross the river Styx, where no mortal could go. Mercury crossed freely back and forth, and so it was Mercury who arranged for Persephone to be released 6 months a year. And in some ways, this Mercury-Pluto conjunction is also a statement about talk therapy. I've said this before in many other teachings of mine, but the fact of the matter is that in talk therapy, we use Mercury, our mind, our talk, our communication, to go into the hell realms, into our unconsciousness, and to bring things up into the open where we can actually work on them. We can't work on anything if it is not in our awareness. So this Mercury conjunct Pluto that's exact on Friday, February 10th, is an opportunity to bring things up from the unconscious in order to process them, in order to work on them. This is also the last day of Mercury in Capricorn. And on Saturday, the 11th, Mercury moves into Aquarius, where the Sun still is and Saturn is. And Mercury's entry into Aquarius is another kind of it's another kind of reminder that we're moving more into Aquarius energy. The Sun has been in Aquarius season, but with Saturn in Aquarius and the Sun still moving towards its conjunction with Saturn, which occurs on February 16th. We'll get there in a moment. There's a feeling that we can't be fully free in Aquarius, or fully free as we'd like to be or as we usually are. And it won't be until Saturn moves out of Aquarius into Pisces next month that that's going to free up. But right now, while Mercury moves into Aquarius, it does nudge our mind, or maybe even push our thinking into the future, into more global thinking. We're thinking about the community rather than ourselves. We're thinking about humanity rather than our own private energy. This can be very exciting. Mercury in Aquarius is intelligent. It's conceptual. It's futuristic. It's even reminiscent of or connected to artificial intelligence, which is a whole mixed bag that we'll be not only hearing about a whole lot more in the months and years ahead, but certainly something that I'll be speaking about more, because as Pluto moves into Aquarius, we're being thrust into that realm of having to deal with more of what we are calling AI, but things that we really we can't even conceptualize yet. And it's my contention, I've said this before, I'll say it here, I think that as AI, artificial intelligence, really makes itself known and felt on many, many different levels, this is going to have a greater impact even than the internet did back in the early 90s as the World Wide Web began to unfold. I think that we have no idea of how big and how important this move into artificial intelligence will be. And Mercury moving into Aquarius, I think, is part of that. It nudges our brains into thinking on that level. Also on February 11th, Saturday, which is actually a big day. Not only does Mercury move into Aquarius, but we also have Mars making a sextile with Chiron. And remember, Mars is how we're moving forward. And Mars in Gemini is a bit distractible. Wouldn't say distracted, but it's curious. I'm doing this with my head because it's like Mars wants to move this way and then that way. And then it's anything that happens that Mars in Gemini wants to follow up on. And as it makes this sextile with Chiron in Aries, there's a sense of actually being able to make physical motions toward healing our own wounds, healing being a participant in healing the wounds of those around us, also in forgiving others. Also, there's a sense of just wanting to move with that energy. Mars and Chiron are both hard energies of a sort. And yet, when they are sextile, we have the ability here through communication. And again, communication is heightened. And remember also that Mars is still in that waning, there's residual energy from its sesqui-square to Mercury and Pluto. And even though that's beginning to wane a bit, there's still that energy there, and yet that Mars sextile to Chiron gives us the ability to face some of these previous wounds. We might be more empathetic. We might have more sensitivity or be attracted toward following up energy that has more to do with sensitivity to the underdog, to the excluded people, to whoever they may be. Not only people, animals, just situations. We're more open to those things which are kind of like the underdog, if you will. And on top of that, we have one more thing happening on Saturday, which makes Saturday really quite a powerful day, and that is that Jupiter in Aries is aspecting the sun, or actually the sun is making a semi-square. That's a half square to Jupiter, and that's not exact till later in the evening, but we're going to feel it all day. And the attraction here is to want to commit to more than we can do. It's to grow more than we actually can assimilate. With both the Mars sextile Chiron and the Sun half square to Jupiter, there's a sense of we're really wanting to reach out and do more. And it may be almost like too much as we adjust to Mercury having just moved into Aquarius. It's a powerful day, and I think that it will be reflected by how we interact with others. And I'm just making a note in my mind that this will be the first full day of the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles, and I imagine the networking buzz on Saturday will be quite profound, maybe even more so than it will be the following days on Sunday and Monday. Sunday the 12th is a bit of a quiet day. The moon is in Scorpio. There's a sense of perhaps like we overdid stuff on Saturday and we just need to kind of hold our energy in a bit. We still have the applying aspect of Mars that is sesqui-squaring Pluto. Mercury is slightly moving out of the mix. There's still some deeper energy cooking. We're still getting the energy off of the Jupiter half square, the Sun half square to Jupiter, even the Chiron, Mars-Chiron connection. But as the moon moves through Scorpio, it will, again, midday, oppose Uranus in Taurus, and there can be a bit of disruptive energy there, but I think this energy is perhaps easier to keep internalized, even though it can be a bit of a complexity in trying to make it all fit together. That is on Sunday, the 12th. Monday the 13th is another, from an aspect standpoint, another relatively quiet day. The moon is still in Scorpio till midday. By evening, it moves on into Sagittarius. On the 13th, we're getting a little bit of time almost to assimilate what it is that's gone on over the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and by Monday evening, when the moon moves into Sagittarius, though, it's like now we want to go to town. Now we want to take things to the next step. And in some ways, we're coming into and we're already feeling the energy of that Mars sesqui-square to Pluto. Remember, we had the Mercury sesqui-square Mars back on February 9th. And now, and that Mercury was coming into a conjunction with Pluto. Now Mercury has moved out of the way. It's only 4 degrees out of the way. But the fact of the matter is that Pluto now is coming into that exact sesqui-square. And so there's deep rumblings here. There's stuff that is happening that is like incredible power struggle. You know, Mars and Pluto, when they get together, there can be some nasty interactions. I mean, Mars is combative. Mars is angry. Mars can even be rageful. Mars is the warrior. Pluto is the underworld. I mean, when anger comes to the underworld, or the lord of the underworld, you know, the devil, the hell realms, who's going to win? I've often said that when Mars and Pluto battle, if Mars doesn't win on the first strike, because that's what Mars is good at, Pluto will always win in the long run. But here we have this thing going on that Pluto in Capricorn, in its last days of Capricorn, its job was to create upheaval and to deconstruct the structures, whether that be the government, which it certainly did a good job there, whether it be banks and commercial and big business, whether it be roads and bridges and all those things that are external structures, the monetary system, banking, that Pluto moving through Capricorn has been working on taking those things apart so they can be created anew. And yet now Mars in Gemini is coming up with all these, solutions, all these ideas, and yet the two are not getting along. We definitely have some power struggle going on through the first half of February, but I think in some ways, although there's no exact aspects on the 13th, by the 14th, when that Mars is exact sesqui-square to Pluto, I think we're really coming into some powerful struggles that we may see being played out on the national or even international political scene. It's also interesting that this difficult aspect of Mars sesqui-square Pluto is occurring on that day that we celebrate as Valentine's Day. And so it's intriguing to me because there may be more going on beneath the surface than is happening on whatever it is that we're doing on that day. One alleviating factor is that the moon moving through Sagittarius creates trines. to both Jupiter in Aries and Chiron in Aries. And there's it's not a very soft and soothing energy, but it is a smoothing out energy. In other words, the moon in Sagittarius is not very sensitive. It's outgoing. It's pouring out its ideas, its direction, its intentions. And Jupiter and Chiron and Aries are also manifesting outwardly. And so when the moon makes a trine to first Jupiter early in the day and then Chiron later in the day, this is on Valentine's Day, there certainly can be motions of expression of love that take the pressure off the deeper inner power struggles. But this is an interesting day, and we'll see where it leads. We're also getting one other pull here that's not exact until the 15th, but we're surely going to be feeling it on the 14th, and it's going to be important to what's happening on the 14th because it is an energy that can help soften all this other harder energy that we've been talking about. And that is that Venus in Pisces comes into an exact conjunction with Neptune in Pisces early in the morning on February 15th. Now, the Venus-Neptune conjunction can be incredibly sweet. It can also be incredibly dangerous. Why can it be dangerous? Because it can be misleading. Remember, Neptune is the shapeshifter. Neptune is the illusions of being under a spell. And Venus is love. I mean, Venus-Neptune conjunct is the magic of infatuation. It's the magic of being in love, falling in love, that crazy head over heels, losing perspective and focusing on something that is really based upon a wish fulfillment that is magical. And we certainly can make dreams come true. But the Venus-Neptune part of it is just the dream. And so we have to be careful about confusing the reality of what we're experiencing. And this is true even on Valentine's Day on the 14th, but even more so on the 15th. We have to be careful about confusing what we think we see with what's out there. And often when I talk about Venus and Neptune together, I talk about what happens afterwards when Saturn returns into the picture, which for us it will do on the 16th. And that's because the sun is coming into a conjunction with Saturn on the 16th. Incredibly rock and roll, roller coaster, powerful days here because the Venus-Neptune is that falling in love with love. And it doesn't have to be a person. It can be an idea. It can be a concept. It can be a goal in our life. It can be some sort of dream that remember the Disney line from the song, "A dream is a wish your heart makes." And so that's the Venus-Neptune part. It's an illusion. And I've said many times before, an illusion doesn't have to be untrue. An illusion is simply based on the wish fulfillment, but it's that illusion that we then can work at to make it come true. This is the part where dreams can come true. On the other hand, not all dreams come true, and it's Saturn's job to crystallize or to bring into reality those dreams of illusion so it can separate out what can come true and what is just a dream. And when Saturn conjoins the sun, the following day, Saturn joins the sun on February 16th. And we're already feeling this for a day or two before, so we got that serious side of things cooking. But this is what I would call disillusionment. And people often say disillusionment, that's bad. I don't want to live my life being disillusioned. Well, being disillusioned is dealing with reality because the illusion is the Neptune fantasy. And then the reality, the constriction, the crystallization, the pulling, making it real is the sun being restricted or conjoined by Saturn. And so it might be that what begins on Valentine's Day that becomes this incredible dream, actually by Wednesday becomes more real. Now, that becoming more real can go one of two ways. It can go, oh my God, that was a fantasy. I need to move on. That was just crazy thinking. And it had nothing to do with reality. That's on one hand. On the other hand, that can also mean that this is a time of crystallization when we actually can make that dream come true. The problem is that often dreams are more beautiful when they exist in our imagination, when they actually precipitate. Saturn crystallizes them into precipitation. They fall to Earth. They become real, and they're not often as pretty as they are in reality as they were in imagination. But this is the process that we'll be going through in mid-February. By the 17th, that would be Thursday, we have Mercury coming into a half square with Neptune, and that Mercury will come into that half square with Neptune to heighten the dream part again. We're vacillating back and forth between what's real and what's dream, and this can be a bit confusing, actually. On the 17th, we also have Mercury making a sextile with Jupiter. And again, Jupiter and Neptune have affinity because they're both about making something better. They're both about expansion. Neptune is often its expansion without any limit. Jupiter is expanding with a limit. And so that Mercury sextile Jupiter can be a let's find a growth path to make this real, whatever it is. On the 18th, the sun moves from Aquarius into Pisces, and that occurs in the early afternoon Pacific time at 2:34, actually. But we are also, we have to be aware of a couple of other things that are cooking here. And one is that we're coming toward a new moon, and that new moon actually will be in Pisces. And yet for a little bit of time on Saturday, the 18th, we're going to have 4 planets in Aquarius. This is a real pileup of the moon, Mercury, Saturn, and the sun. And yet the sun is going to escape into Pisces, and I think escape is a good concept for a planet moving from Aquarius into Pisces. It kind of the boundaries slip away. Now with Saturn still in Aquarius, we'll still be feeling that, but remember that Saturn moves into Pisces in March, and so we're really getting a bit of foreshadowing here as the sun moves into Pisces on February 18th. We also have on the 19th, we have Venus making a sextile with Pluto. Again, Venus-Pluto now as a sextile is a bit smoother than the Mercury conjoined Pluto or any squares or quincunxes to Pluto. In some ways here, Venus now is enjoying that trip into the underworld. There's a dark side to love that can be shadowy, and yet with the right level of trust and the right situation, this can be an incredibly powerful experience. And this is on February 19th that feeds right into the new moon. The moon moves into Pisces in the afternoon and actually in the evening, and then at 11:05 p.m. we actually have the technical new moon at that moment. 11:05 p.m. is the new moon in Pisces. This new moon is a kind of a breaking away of the hard Uranian energy that we've been living under. And I think, and there still is a little bit of a Uranian kick that we'll get when Venus makes a half square with Uranus. Also today, we get a little bit of that kick. I say today, I mean on the 20th. And then we get another little Uranian kick on the 21st when Mercury squares Uranus. But then it's almost like things have shifted because we now have the sun is in Pisces. The sun is moving eventually toward a conjunction with Neptune in Pisces. That won't occur till next month. But then we're going to have Mercury move into Pisces. And it's almost like the energy is softening. And I think that this can really help us get in touch with our emotions, get in touch with our feelings, and become more compassionate, especially in areas where we've perhaps hardened up a bit. So on February 20th, we have one other thing that occurs, and this is right after the new moon. I'm going to come back and talk more about the new moon in a moment, but the new moon occurs at 11:05 p.m. Pacific time. And I say Pacific time because that's on February 19th. That's actually 2:05 a.m. in New York. And even later on in the day, like 7 a.m. in Western Europe on the 20th. But just less than an hour, 50 minutes after the new moon, at 11:55 p.m. Pacific time. This is like the last moments of the day of February 19th, that Venus leaves Pisces and enters Aries. And now we're getting another flavor, and we're getting a feeling of what's coming around the bend, because remember, we're still a full month away from the vernal equinox, at least in the northern hemisphere, the autumnal equinox in the southern hemisphere, but we're a full month away from the sun blasting into Aries, and we still got a ways to go before Mercury enters Aries too. But the fact of the matter is that when Venus enters Aries, we now have Venus and Jupiter and Chiron all in Aries, and we're really kind of wanting to be more expressive in the moment. We're kind of wanting to feel what's going on, and we may not be as soft and sensitive as Venus was having us feel while Venus was in Pisces. Granted, the sun is still in Pisces for another month, and I think we really need that. But on the 20th, we have Venus making, as Venus moves into Aries, it makes a half square with Uranus. Remember, a half square is 45 degrees, so we have Venus at 0 degrees of Aries, 30 degrees of Aries plus 15 degrees of Taurus. That's 30 plus 15 is 45. There's your half square between Venus and Uranus. And again, it's like, for some of us, things are just moving too fast, or we may feel a bit disjointed from the being thrust into that sense of change, because things are now beginning to change. They've been changing, but things are actually changing faster and changing more now that Mercury has moved out of its shadow and that Mars is gaining speed still. Mars doesn't move out of its shadow for another month, because it takes Mars until it moves past 25 degrees of Gemini, and that's not until toward the end of March. And then by the end of March, Mars will have already moved from Gemini into Cancer. But things are beginning to move forward, and we can tell that they are. So we have Venus on the 20th making that half square with Uranus. We have Mercury making a sextile with Chiron. Now this comes back to all of those hurts and wounds and those things that may have come up from the Pluto energy. And the Mercury here says, communicate, talk about it, go into some sort of interaction. If there's no one else to talk about it with, then journal it, write it down. Go into a place where you can actually use that Mercury to do the work of teaching, learning, healing, re-expressing old wounds, not to go back into the hurt and pain, but to move past it, to free yourself from it, to move beyond it. That's on the 20th. Then on the 21st, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, that is the Mercury making a square. Remember, we started the month out with the sun in mid-degrees of Aquarius. Now the sun's moved on into Pisces, but we started out the month with the sun in Aquarius making a square to Uranus and Taurus. And now by the 21st, we now have Mercury doing the same thing, where Mercury is squaring Uranus. And again, this is disruptive. This is exciting for some people and totally earth-shattering for other people. There's that sense of brilliant thinking, but the mind is erratic. We may be thinking things a mile a minute. Can thoughts go a mile a minute? We may be thinking things that are just one thing, then another, and unable to turn our mind off. And some thoughts may be amazingly brilliant, and other thoughts may be amazingly stupid. The key is that when Mercury is squaring Uranus, write those damn thoughts down so that after the pressure of that conflictive, crazy-making, anxiety-producing square, like having 4 extra cups of coffee, after that square begins to de-attenuate, after it begins to go away, then you can look at all those thoughts that you had that you wrote down, and you can pick out which ones are worth working with. Because often when Mercury squares Uranus, there can be some mental, intellectual breakthroughs, but not every thought we think is necessarily useful or a keeper, as I like to say. So 21st, Mercury square Uranus. On the 22nd, we get Mercury moving from that square to Uranus into a trine with Mars. And this is interesting because it's almost like we're crazy, we're erratic, this is exciting, oh my God, it's a roller coaster of the mind. And then Mercury trines Mars. It's air sign, so there's still movement. We're still on the roller coaster. But all of a sudden, that roller coaster, it's not just that it smooths out a little bit. All of a sudden, we like it, and we know where we're going, and we're kind of in this flow of energy of being able to do things, Mars, physically, that are communicating what we need to say. There was an old commercial that was for florists being connected up by a telephone service. This is back 40 years ago. It was the FTD, the floral transmission delivery or something like that. And their commercial was "Say it with flowers." And it had this animated thing of this cartoon flowers coming out of their mouth. And in a way, the Mercury trine Mars is not just say it with flowers, but it's say it. And it's not say it just in words. It's say it by doing something, by going through emotion. And I think that February 22nd is a day where we can actually put things into motion. We do have a deeper energy cooking on the 22nd that is exact on the 23rd, but this is a slow-moving aspect, and it's an aspect of a half square between Saturn and Chiron. This is the first half square of 3. Saturn at 28 and a half degrees of Aquarius is a 45-degree angle to Chiron at 13 and a half degrees of Aries. Now Saturn moves into Pisces, and then it turns retrograde, and as it retrogrades, it makes a second half square to Chiron. Chiron's moved on a few degrees, and that second half square occurs while Saturn is in Pisces, not in Aquarius. And then Saturn turns direct, and it makes its third and final half square to Chiron on November 25th. So the point I'm making here is that what's going on in the middle toward the end of February that is related to this Saturn making a half square to Chiron has to do with a conflictive, disruptive energy between that which we know to be true. Saturn in Aquarius, it's authority, but it's not the authority of a structure. It's the authority of an idea. It's the community itself as authority. And that authority is being tested or pushed up against our feelings of wounds of like, oh my God, we've been here before. What are we going to do to change this? Now, I can already think of social events that are building that might be, connected to this, but it's really going to take until the end of the year until we really understand how this Saturn semi-square, half square to Chiron really works. But the first of the three of them is exact on February 23rd. And again, this is a slow enough aspect that we'll be feeling it all through February, but really through the middle of February to the end of February, we're going to be feeling it strongly. And it might at times make us remember the hopelessness of not being able to resolve this energy, because it is a conflict, and it's a conflict like a square, but it's not as easy to express outwardly. Okay, so that's exact on February 23rd, that Saturn semi-square to Chiron. Once we get through that, toward the last few days of the month, there's bothersome energy, but it's not at the same level as conflicts have been earlier. On February 26th, we have Mercury making a half square with Venus. And on the 28th, we have Mercury making a half square with Jupiter. Yeah, that Venus and Jupiter are coming closer and closer together. And so the half squares that Mercury are making with Venus and Jupiter, in some ways, are kind of leading us to look forward to Venus actually joining up with Jupiter, which occurs on March 2nd. And so there is some resolution, I think, to the conflicts, the annoyance, the irritations we might be feeling, as our communication in some ways is just not able to say how good something might feel or how important something is that can be a positive development. This is the Venus-Jupiter coming toward a conjunction. But as Mercury makes those half squares to those planets, it's going to be in some way difficult to say exactly what we mean. And remember also that Mercury, as it's whizzing through Aquarius, moves into Pisces on March 3rd. And it's not only making a half square to Jupiter and Chiron, to Jupiter, Venus and Jupiter, but also to Chiron. And so that becomes a very intriguing condensation of energies as Venus, Chiron, and Jupiter all come together the beginning of March. So that's it. It's an intriguing month. It's an energy flow forward. There are certainly going to be surprises and big events that occur with the squares to Uranus, and with Uranus so active during the full moon at the beginning of the month, and with the transition from Uranus to Saturn stuff, with Neptune to Saturn stuff, with the Venus-Neptune conjunction followed by the Sun-Saturn conjunction mid-month. And that's it for now. Again, don't forget to look at the first comment below for the links to the events that are coming up. And as always, much appreciation to those of you who are subscribers or members on Patreon. You make this work possible. Thank you very much. And that's it. I'll see you all next month, or for those of you who are subscribers, I'll see you all sooner. Think cosmically, act locally. I'm Rick Levine.